Joining us now, a member of the Armed Services Committee in the House, Texas Congressman Pat Fallon. Pat, good to see you. Thanks for being with us. Again, I want to get your reaction to this stark difference today. Again, we've talked about Donald Trump going to the wake of a fallen police officer. Then we have Joe Biden, who goes to a fundraiser that's star-studded with two former presidents, and the image that that presents to the American people. Your reaction?
Well, who's the hero? The hero is the fallen law enforcement officer who gave his life for his community and his country. And that's who Donald Trump is honoring. And Joe Biden's honoring the almighty dollar. And now you think, Sean, it's very clear that Joe Biden is more worried about polling in Michigan than he is the security of our country and Israel's. So it's really a travesty, and it's awful. And those folks that are screaming about healthcare in Gaza, yeah, that lays at the feet of Hamas. Hamas has been exploiting those 2 million people on the Gaza Strip for the last 20 years.
Yeah, it's just astonishing if you look at the poll numbers. That was when he started pivoting very clearly, Congressman, that 13% of the primary voters in Michigan chose to be uncommitted. More than 101,000 people turned on him, and he almost instantaneously, not so subtly, started turning his back on Israel, our greatest ally in the Middle East.
Dagen, during his State of the Union address, he said that there were 30,000 folks in Gaza that were killed. That's Hamas's number. That is an inflated number. That doesn't have any credence or credibility at all. And yet the president of the United States parroted a terrorist talking point. I was disgusted and horrified when I saw that. If you really look at the numbers, it's probably closer. It's hard to say, quite honestly, but it's certainly a fraction of the 30,000. And half of those folks, half of the people that were killed, were fighters, were Hamas terrorists that were hiding behind innocent civilians, using them as human shields. So this, again, lays at the feet of Hamas and not the IDF.
Yeah, no, listen, one last quick question here. You know, Joe Biden thinks the American people are stupid. They're not. When Joe Biden caves to longstanding American policy because he's getting protested by people, that's not leadership. Leadership is doing the right thing, not putting your finger in the wind to see which way the polls are going. But that's exactly what Joe Biden is doing right now, looking at polls and deciding American policy decisions based on what a few protesters on a few college campuses in a few states think, as opposed to what's doing right by way of the American people. Hey, Pat, if you do me a favor, stick around with us. We have Nate Foy, who's down at the protest right now. We want to get to him and get a live report from Nate Foy. Nate, you got us now. It's great. Your system is up and working. The gremlins are out. What are you seeing?
Well, good evening, Dagen and Sean. So the presidential motorcade got here about a half an hour ago with President Joe Biden, as well as former presidents Barack Obama and Bill Clinton. You can see that the NYPD has blocked off the Radio City Music Hall, where this fundraiser is set to start at 7:30, and it has already raised tons of money. $25 million, according to the Biden campaign. Tickets range from $225 all the way up to $500,000. There's different tiers to the entrance to this event. I'll get into that momentarily. First, there's a lot of protesters here as well. About 500 pro-Palestinian protesters chanting things like Joe Biden is not welcome here. I'm looking at a sign just behind my camera that reads "Genocide Joe Biden, CEO of Imperialist Murder." So a lot of angry people here, and we actually just captured this chant from moments ago as the protesters arrived. Take a look.
Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine! Free, free, free Palestine! Free, free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!
Dagen, Sean, President Joe Biden landed in New York City today with former President Obama, and tonight's fundraiser comes after months of pressure on Biden after moments like this in Atlanta. Take a look.
You're a dictator, do genocide, Joe! Tens of thousands of Palestinians!
In California. Again, Dagen and Sean, we have heard that sentiment tonight at this protest, as well as others in New York and others across the country, including Washington, D.C. and California. The main event at tonight's fundraiser will be a conversation between Presidents Biden, Obama, and Clinton. It will be moderated by late-night talk show host Stephen Colbert. A picture with all three presidents will cost $100,000. I mentioned the tiers of entrance. They're $250,000 tickets and $500,000 tickets that get you into a private reception after the main event. So the entire thing is going to be hosted by actress Mindy Kaling. There will be musical performances from Lizzo and Queen Latifah. That will, of course, be inside, again, starting at 7:30. But right now, outside, protesters are chanting, motivated by a very different opinion of President Joe Biden. We'll send it back to you.
Thanks,
No doubt
Nate.
about that. Thank you, Nate Foy.
Yeah, I wonder if any attendees got mugged at gunpoint by an illegal alien, or any of the ladies attending got punched in the face by a deranged criminal. Happens all day long, every day, but I guess not. They're, again, floating above the fray. Congressman Pat Fallon is still with us. Moving on to this. Since Joe Biden took office, more than 7 million migrants, illegal aliens, have crossed the southern border. Biden's repeatedly said that he doesn't have the money or the power to secure the border, but he seems to have found $380 million to, quote, enhance border security in places like Egypt and Jordan. And now the president of Guatemala wants a cut too, calling on Biden to throw money his way. Listen.
What we are trying to say is fundamentally about cooperation is not sending money. Cooperation can be by creating conditions in which we can invite you to invest in Guatemala and establish factories, works that can begin to produce and create jobs. What we are doing is that we're working together because what we agree is that we have to work to allow people what we call the right to stay. People have a right to remain in their places.
Congressman, it's every which way, it is just a travesty what has happened under Biden.
Dagen, Joe Biden is absolutely lying to the American people. You ask go down to the border and talk to Customs and Border Patrol, and everyone down there will tell you if he simply reinstitutes wait in Mexico, President Trump's policy where you will wait in Mexico while your asylum case is adjudicated, the numbers will go down by 70%. He can do that he doesn't need any congressional approval. He can do that himself. And in Texas, we have seen in the last 13 years, criminal aliens commit 513,000 crimes that resulted in 187,000 convictions. And we're talking about murder, kidnapping, sexual assault, rape, etc. I mean, vicious crimes. So Joe Biden has made not only Texas, but every state a border state.
No doubt, and that's why this has become a national issue. And by the way, the Guatemalan president there, it felt a little bit like extortion. Invest in my company, in my country for jobs, and maybe won't send as many people up to your border. Pat Fallon, always good to see you. Thanks for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Sean. See you, Dagen. God bless.
God bless.
Happy